Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna Barron, news editor of SD Times. I'd like to welcome you to episode 2 of the SD Times live microwebinar series on data verification with Melissa. Last time we talked about email address validation, and today we'll be talking about name verification. Specifically, we'll be talking about Melissa's global name verification service, which validates that the names in a database are correct. With me to discuss this is Tim Sider, data quality analyst at Melissa. Thanks for joining me today, Tim.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So let's start with this. Why would a company need to validate the names in a database? I get why last month we talked about validating emails because obviously you need to make sure that things are being delivered properly, but it seems like there would be a little more wiggle room with names.
Yeah, unlike some of those other known data types where it's uh, definitively a right or a wrong answer, names are going to have either validating names are either going to have an implicit or an explicit benefit. Implicitly, uh, you want to establish a good customer relationship. You want to support the customer's sense of identity. So whether it's a mail campaign or some customer logs into your portal, they want to look like it's a friendly service, a good relationship, things of that nature. So that all goes to providing good customer service. An explicit benefit is if you can verify a name or validate a name as being real or not real, uh, that service or this service can be used in tandem to a next step, maybe storing data accurately in your database or using name verification in another process like identity verification, where you want to know for sure whether you're dealing with a good name and then put it in tandem with an address or a phone or something like that to establish an identity.
So how does verifying names work when there are so many different ones out there and even multiple spellings of the same name?
That's a good question. Names, we see it's not a distinct knowledge base set
Right.
where it's static and it's got each country or organization has a distinct set of names or rules. So, and names are very fluid. The valid names are changing all the time. So we try to maintain, a large list of known names and known words that are associated with names, and that allows us to establish whether your input is actually a name or is not a name or could represent something else.
So given that the name of this service is global name verification, I take it like you are accounting for different names in different countries. So how does that work when that's like a whole new set of names when you start going to like different languages and cultures? And on top of that, like different honorifics that you might find in front of a name in different languages and cultures?
Yep, yep. Uh, it's global name web service or our global name service, since it allows for any name anywhere in tandem. If your input has a specified country, that helps us associate certain keywords associated in that name field as being valid in that country or not. So, for example, like you said, an honorific. If we a general parser might say, Signora Maria Smith. Um, you might parse that Senora as being your first name, but since we have an associated country, we know that that's an honorific in another country. The words represent different things in different countries, not just different words, sometimes the same word. For example, Roy. Uh, if you're looking at that name in the United States, it's probably a first name. But in French Canadian speaking parts of Canada and maybe France, ROY represents something else, Wa, which is a last name. So knowing the country helps in that manner. And kind of the same, that goes kind of right in tandem with the language too, or characters that we know that different languages have certain keywords that represent certain things, and certain extended characters are a kind of a hint to say, oh, it's this language, so we had better parse that name that way. So all those things kind of taken in tandem allow us to uh, parse global names a little bit differently depending on where they come from or where they originate.
Mhm. I know that one problem companies might run into is distinguishing between real names and fake names that someone might have like input into a form to conceal their identity, like Mickey Mouse or Taylor Swift, or even like people can like type vulgarities into these forms.
Yeah,
So how do you deal with all that?
right. Uh, Kind of along the same lines, we have this large knowledge base for different languages, different cultures. Let's say vulgarities, for example. If we recognize one of those words, we'll flag it as such. So when you process names using this service, names will be, if we think it's a general parse, we'll return a result to say, we think this is a valid name. We recognize the first name, last name. But if we do detect the vulgarity, we'll flag it as so. And therefore, it's the onus is on the user who's calling the service to say, what do we want to do with this?
Mhm.
Vulgarity, they're probably going to want to get rid of it. But suspicious flags like Mickey Mouse, Taylor Swift, um, they may or may not be valid. Mickey Mouse is probably not valid, and that's easy. But Taylor Swift, um, there could be more than one Taylor Swift or the actual Taylor Swift. So you want to flag it as being suspicious, and then maybe therefore verify it with the address or take some other action to determine whether it's real or not.
Mhm. And finally, how can you distinguish between like a person's name and a company name? Because I know sometimes when you're like just quickly filling out a form, you might enter the wrong thing in the wrong spot. Like, for example, your company is actually a good example of this. Like Melissa is the company
Yep.
name, but it's also like a person's name. So like how and I know you're not the only company that has like a name that's also a person's name. So like how do you deal with situations like that where it's like it's kind of unclear if it's inputted correctly or not.
Yeah, that's actually a good example. And it's again, just like suspicious of vulgars, we have a knowledge base, a database of uh, words associated with companies.
Mhm.
So in that case, data will flag that as being, um, a company, just like corporation or corp and other for each culture and country. We have a database of company indicators where we'll flag those as being potentially being a company, and therefore you would probably want to, if you're, processing a batch or a large amount of data, say, okay, all the ones that were not flagged as suspicious or company, you know, move them on to the process. But if they're flagged as companies, you may want to say, let's treat these a little bit differently. Unlike suspicious or vulgar, you may just want to get rid of those. But companies, they're valid contacts. They're a lot of times they're meant to be in your database, maybe in a separate table, but they're valid contacts. You don't necessarily want to get rid of them. You just want to use those keywords to identify them.
Mhm. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, you can watch a replay of this video on sdtimes.com, which should be posted within the next 24 hours. This is the first episode in a series of microwebinars, and you can catch the next one on global phone verification on September 19th. And if you want to learn more about Melissa, head to melissa.com. Thanks for tuning in.